Are empaths real? Hi, my name is Doug Knoll. I'm a speaker, teacher, author, and peacemaker, and I have dedicated my life to understanding human conflict. I have learned that emotional competency is the path to peace and happiness for every person, and I've developed a new website, empath.help, to provide resources for highly sensitive empaths, and a place for non-empaths to be trained in empathic skills. In a few minutes, I'm going to talk about the degrees of empathy, but first let's look at the question, are empaths real? Well, the short scientific answer is absolutely yes. And those that claim that empaths are not real have not studied the science. However, an accurate answer to the question, are empaths real, requires a more detailed explanation. Many people report varying degrees of empathic sensitivity, and stories abound on the internet and in dozens of articles that talk about the characteristics of an empath. The question, are empaths real, is confusing because it asks for a yes-no answer. The truth is that humans range from having no empathic ability on one extreme to experiencing a hyper-empathic ability on the other. So as you can see, answering the question, are empaths real, depends upon how you define an empath. Your degree of empathy might range from low to high, but you're still an empath. So what are the degrees of empathy? People experience degrees of empathy, but this does not change the question, are empaths real? The real question is, what are these degrees of empathy? And there are really three broad categories. First, there are people with little or no empathy. And people with little or no empathy fall into two broad categories. Psychopathy. Now, psychopaths are people that have no empathy. They have no moral conscience. They are cold, calculating personalities that look out only for themselves, and they can be violent. The other category of people with no empathy are sociopaths. Sociopaths differ from psychopaths in that they have a weak moral conscience. They tend to be hot-headed and impulsive, but again, they lack any kind of empathy. Then we have people with normal empathy. Normal empathy is the ability to feel another's emotional state while understanding what caused the other person's feeling. The empathizer is aware of her feelings and distinguishes between herself and other. People in this group have low to high emotional intelligence. Also, people who are emotionally shut down or unavailable can be trained to be empathic. Emotionally shut down people are people who in childhood most likely experienced no emotional safety. Because they were emotionally invalidated or emotionally abused, they set up defense mechanisms to protect themselves. And so they decided that no emotions were better than feeling the pain of emotional invalidation, and they became emotionally shut down. People who are emotionally unavailable are people who can feel emotions, but they don't show those emotions because emotions scare them. They are frightened of emotions, again, most likely because of childhood neglect and childhood abuse. People who are emotionally available experience emotions and are able to express their emotions in some degree or another. People who are emotionally self-aware are people who not only experience emotions, but are aware of their emotional experience in the moment. We call these people highly emotionally intelligent. On the far extreme are people who are hyper-empathic. A small percentage of people, usually about 1 to 2% of all humans, have hyperempathy. These people usually have a condition known as motor touch synesthesia, or MTS. Motor touch synesthesia occurs when normally distinct senses blur together. Some people can hear colors, or see sounds, or even taste words. In the case of motor touch synesthesia, sight and touch overlap to the extent that if a person sees someone's face touched, they feel it on their own face. People with motor touch synesthesia are better at recognizing facial expressions of emotion and report higher levels of emotional reactivity. Now, hyperempathy may be conscious or unconscious. Unconscious hyperempathy blurs oneself with another, and people with this condition seem to have difficulty distinguishing between themselves and the other person. They are unconsciously picking up on others' feelings and interpreting those feelings as their own. People with conscious hyperempathy are aware that they're picking up other people's feelings and still have a difficult time separating whose feelings belong to whom. Training can help hyper-empaths gain control over their experiences. So let's look at two more interesting phenomena. First of all, what is sympathy? Sympathy is a pro-social motivation driven by empathy. When someone is sympathetic, she sees a friend in distress. She becomes distressed at her friend's distress and offers to comfort or soothe her friend and herself. Sympathy differs from empathy in that the sympathetic person is not feeling the friend's upset. She is simply upset herself. And what is compassion? Compassion is the feeling of concern for others and includes caring or comforting behavior. Unlike sympathy or empathy, the compassionate person recognizes the distress of others, but usually does not feel personal distress nor the distress of the other. Now, this does not mean that a compassionate person is not empathetic or lacks empathy. It's just that in the moment, she is centered and does not feel that distress. So the question, are empaths real, must be answered yes. However, like many questions, true understanding requires a much more nuanced answer. If you remain skeptical about whether empaths are real, this article reviews the science on the subject. Towards a Neuroscience of Empathy, Ontogeny, Phylogeny, Brain Mechanisms, Context, and Psychopathology. Is this interesting? Well, leave your comments below and let us know. And if you like this video, give it a thumbs up and subscribe to the channel. In my next video, I will talk about empaths and relationships. And if you're interested in learning more and want to join our tribe, visit empath.help.